I don't want to take up too much of anybody's time if this is our short crew. I don't think that there is a need to sort of force a full meeting if we don't need one. This monthly meeting exists so that everybody can sort of get anything off their chest and get counsel from everybody, and that is a reduced utility when nobody's here. And we have time for nationals to change any rules that people think that we should change before April 1st, even if we don't get a ton done today. But I did want to open the floor. I mean, I have a couple of fun things that have gone wrong in Pennsylvania that we can talk about. And if anybody else has sort of fun things that have gone wrong, Kim's certainly got one of the saddest stories, the parents gone wild story. Moving from Minnesota passive aggressive to Minnesota aggressive. But if anybody else wants to, I'm happy to sort of throw out what's happened in Pennsylvania. I'm happy to have anybody else pop up with anything that's happened where y'all are, and we can just sort of go around the horn and talk about how we've dealt with it.
Sounds good.
Go for it, Paul.
All right. So, I mean, the first thing that we've noticed in Pennsylvania is not necessarily that we're having a huge time problem with overages, although we're having more than we had before. But we've had a huge problem getting the timekeepers to actually communicate about those overages. So we've had a lot more like stupid ass disputes between the timekeepers right at the end of the trial, or because Pennsylvania's rules are idiosyncratic, we penalize after. So we've had like timekeepers fighting after the fact over 2 or 3 minute differences, which are almost always round dispositive, because they're not communicating in chat, even though we were super clear about communicating in chat.
We've had the same problem.
What everybody else is sort of seeing with time.
Yeah, we've had the same problem of timekeepers being, wind up 2-3 minutes apart somehow. And we have the timekeepers turn the cameras on, hold the cards up to the camera, turn them off, and then put it in chat. And even still, they wind up. We don't do penalties for time, but I've been telling the presiding judges that if you see, the first time you see it being off by more than 15 seconds, at the next natural break, to have the timekeepers come on camera and ask them what the crap's going on and fix it, and then just make a ruling and move on. But yeah, it's been a big problem this year.
In Minnesota, we adopted the national rules. So we allowed the timekeeper for the first round to keep their camera off and just use the chat function, and then turn their camera on at important markers. And our trials were running 3.5 hours long because the timekeepers were missing. They'd turn their camera off, and of course it was free to go get something to eat or do whatever it is that they do. So after round 1, we required both timekeepers to have their face present the entire time. And they didn't have to have their face. They could have a card up or a time stopwatch or something, but their camera was required to be turned on, and it changed our rounds down to 2.5.
Wow.
So
that's a pretty handy hint.
It helped. It held. And we also found out that we have some judges that require every single participant to have their camera on to keep them present, because we were also running into problems where you're the third witness. So, I have about an hour to do whatever I want, and I'll come back on, and then they were delaying the round, and then they were getting docked points because of it. So we have some judges that require every student to have their camera on and be present, which is a lot, but that's how we kept the rounds on time after round 1.
Does anybody else hit on other solutions than that's gotten people? I mean, we sent a nasty email, and that seemed to help a little.
Yeah, who's had success with timing might be the other.
I think part of the problem is that the kids are not sitting next to each other, and so they don't hear the stopwatches beep together and that kind of thing. But I've also had some bad time management issues. I had one team last Saturday use up all 20 minutes of the cross-examination time on the first witness. So they have no cross time for witnesses 2
Yeah.
and 3. It's like, are you not watching the clock or what's happening here? But we haven't had people wander off and get lost or anything. So that's good.
Kim, can I ask, when you said some people put their timers up, what was the mechanism, or how did they do that?
I don't know. I actually popped in on one, so I'm trying to think here. Let me just show you an example. So if I had a stopwatch and I started it and I did that, that's what they would do. I don't know how they did it. That's what they did.
Once I finally got to preside around last week, and once I was really clear with the timekeepers, both of you put your times in the chat box after every witness. We were able to sort of get on top of it. So I'm hoping that just being aggressive with guidance and making sure our PJs do that. And if we pitch it to the PJs as self-preservation, right? This way you won't have to deal with a possible problem. Maybe they'll follow along with it. But yeah, it sounds like it's been a universal issue. And I think Michael's exactly right. I think it's because they're not sitting next to each other. They can't just sort of quickly bounce off of each other ideas and move on. Another issue that we had in Pennsylvania, and this was a more unfortunate one. So, we follow the national rules. We allow the teams to communicate in whatever mechanism they're going to do among the 6 competing team members. Apparently, in one of our rounds, we had a group of teams, the teams that were making fun of the other team and doing like really insulting and nasty things in their own personal Microsoft Teams meeting off to the side. And this was discovered because they accidentally screen shared it. And so the other team saw it. So, I'm just, I don't know if there's anything that you could do, students being students, but it may be a worthwhile point of emphasis for our guidance to coaches about reminding them that the code of ethical conduct applies even when you're in your own little personal teams meeting. Because I think some of those students may wind up being invited to succeed elsewhere in next year's competition.
We've allowed just the 3 attorneys and our parties to the case to be able to communicate. I mean, there's zero way that we can monitor all that and everything, but that was the idea that the coaches kind of came up with during one of our town hall meetings. That if they're not able to be in the same room together, then they can text or group me or something to communicate, to kind of make up for that and everything. But I really haven't seen much of that or with that. The big issue that we've seen is witnesses reading off their script, off of their statement during testimony, that they've got it up on the computer screen, to the point where an evaluator could tell that through the witness's glasses reflection that she was not looking at a Zoom screen, but at something else. And then another teacher emailed me today with a video clip of an opponent witness who was reading from her statement almost like word for word kind of thing. So that's one thing that we're going to have to readdress is teams not reading, not using notes on the stand. At least for witnesses. If attorneys need to, that's them, but you're gonna be obvious when you're doing it. But the witness thing is a big problem.
We had relaxed in Connecticut. We had relaxed the communication rules. Typically in our trials, we only allow the 3 attorneys to speak with each other, and there can be no communications, from outside the bar. We relaxed the rules mainly out of concern for technical issues, to allow the 3 participating team members to communicate with each other, and we've also allowed we've allowed them to speak with their coach in the event of a technical issue. We were concerned that we had enough people come to us with concerns about the honor system and whether people would actually follow the rules, that we decided that at least for this year and for this particular competition, the best course of action was to essentially eliminate those communication restrictions altogether, so that we could at least eliminate that as a source for disputes. And also, we want to, in the event of any kind of technical issue, we want people to be able to resolve that as quickly as they can. And if that means speaking to their teacher and getting some help from their teacher, we wanted to allow that. So, and it was strangely enough, with the exception of 2 judge nightmares, it was the most pain-free mock trial. We're doing a full state tournament. We had day 1 a couple of weeks ago, and it was probably the least painful mock trial tournament I've ever been a part of in Connecticut. There was not a single complaint. I think these kids are so cooped up that they're just desperate for anything to do and just grateful for the chance to do anything. But we received more compliments and really far fewer complaints than we ordinarily get, in a courthouse. So it kind of surprised me. But the 2 judge issues were a genuine night. They were a genuine nightmare at the time. We can laugh about one now, but it wasn't very funny at the time.
What were your judge nightmares? I have one of my own, so I'm curious.
Okay, well, the first, we had 2 in the same afternoon. So one was a judge who was relying on a tablet to do the trial. The tablet kept dying. He didn't have a backup device. And we got to the point where I think we were 3 hours in, every other result was in, that trial hadn't completed their prosecution side. So we basically called it, we called it, and awarded both teams we awarded a tie to both teams. They were teams that were sort of in the upper middle area. They probably weren't going to win, but we wanted to at least keep them in it and keep them involved for next week. So we couldn't have people there till 9 o'clock either, because it got to be 6 o'clock on a Friday. The second thing, during orientations, one judge, who's an older man, who happens to be an actual judge, you could tell he was having some issues with his computer, with his computer and with his Zoom, and was agitated with his wife, who was in the same room. And we went forward, figuring his wife would be able to help him. And at some point during the pre-trial matters, the whole thing, there was some confusion as to the rules. He demanded to know who the 2 teams were, and which ordinarily in Connecticut we share, but for this year we didn't, and we didn't. The staff member didn't have the information, couldn't help him, and he basically virtually stormed out, and refused to go forward, and was berating the staff member, yelling at the teams, and berating his wife, all on camera. So they wanted to know where we found him, and we said Hartford Courthouse.
Yeah, we had a thing that would have been more amusing in retrospect had it not been repeated the following week. We had a couple of judges who didn't understand that if you do as we ask you to and put on the don't show anybody who's not on camera, that when you arrive at the room and during breaks in the room, it'll appear that only the judges are there. And so they decided to have confidential communications among themselves in the presence of all of the teams, including talking about the fact that they were letting all of the evidence in because that's what we told them to do. And one judge making comments that were construed by one of the teams as demonstrating a significant bias on a cultural bias, leading us to throw that ballot out, which was particularly painful since that was a 3-judge round, which meant that we also had to move forward with a sort of weirdo tie thing because the other 2 judges split ballots. And again, that would be like, oh, good lesson learned, move on. I lectured our judges on that before the next week, and then the next judge went in and did a very similar thing. And we have in Philadelphia a group that's the developmental tournament that's for the teams that are a little bit rougher around the edges. And he, basically derogated the idea of being a developmental team to a group of developmental teams that he was judging. So, I mean, just it was not really funny at the time, and it's super not funny in retrospect, but it has given us a useful pointer for make sure your judges actually understand how Zoom works, and make sure that they understand that from the moment that they arrive in the courtroom, they're in the courtroom. because some of them apparently don't. We also had a judge who lost connection. We actually had several judges who lost connection, and that's sort of my fault. I recruit very heavily from the U.S. Department of Justice, the U.S. Attorney's Office locally, because they all owe me favors. And the DOJ network crapped the bed at one point, which wiped out like 6 of our judges because we had recruited. It wasn't even like Zoom had no problems, Verizon had no problems. It was our internal logon network that decided to dump. And that's when we learned that you have to be careful when you distribute, like make sure that all of your judges have the call-in number. Because what we were able to do, even though we'd screwed it up initially, we pivoted quickly to telephone. And then it made it a lot easier. Our presiding judge was able to get back in and just start presiding by telephone. And we lost 7 minutes or so out of that trial because we had to look up the numbers, but we learned our lesson. And so the next time it happened, we were able to just hand them the phone number and get them back working that way. And we really, we had a couple of students who had to do that as well. And it seemed to be working okay for the sort of temporary measure, talk on the phone while you reboot your system or whatever. And we did okay. We didn't lose as much time as we feared we were going to lose. That round went about 10 minutes over, 15 minutes over, but not like John's round, bleeding into the evening hours or whatever.
So
It was
Paul,
tough. It was, yeah. I felt, I felt bad for the judge. He wanted to stay, but I had the teachers texting me saying that the kids were fried because it was the afternoon round. They'd already performed in the morning.
Oof.
And so what we did is after we called the tie, we did offer them a makeup round where they could say get together and just do it as an exhibition, so they would have the opportunity to practice it with another group of better connected volunteers. But they actually declined it. They said they were happy with they were happy to just move forward to the following week. The other thing we did is we brought an Empire mock trial this year. Typically, we run things on a shoestring in house, but we brought an Empire to basically staff the tournament for us and have somebody in every room and use their software. And I couldn't be happier with that decision. It blew our mock trial budget, but it was probably the best decision we could have made in terms of keeping everything together. And like I said, I was surprised how well it went, and it's actually at the point where I think for next year we're looking at maybe going to half virtual trials, even if we're back in person.
I just want to say I don't know if you guys can hear me because I'm having problems. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm the Illinois coordinator, and this is the first time I've actually made it to one of these meetings with my face. So hi. I do pay attention to the emails. They're very helpful. I'm overwhelmed by all the different experiences, but we have decided to use Empire as well, use the process program. So our program isn't until March. I'm hoping that it goes well, but it is really nice to hear that people have had a good experience with them. So far, they've been helpful. I'm sure very tired of me and my questions trying to understand how it all works, but it will also blow our budget. But we started thinking about just some of the technical problems, and I think it'll be worth it, hopefully. If not, hopefully everyone will cut us some slack, because like everyone on this call, this is not what we normally do. We're all trying to kind of build a plane while we're flying, so hopefully we'll not have any of these bad parent experiences, although we have those in person too sometimes. So, but anyway, I do really appreciate this group. It is helpful. So to see what everybody's experiencing. So thanks to everyone, and nice to meet everyone.
Cynthia, you raised your hand
What I want
earlier.
to do with Justin is see if you schedule a get together where basically an open forum with the coaches maybe the week before the trial.
Okay. One really good thing for us is that we have 46 teams signed up, which I'm like, oh, we should have probably a cutoff. But I think about 2/3 of them have already used Process in a different event. So that's really good because they're actually the ones that tipped us off to it. So we have about 15 schools that I don't know if they have or not. They may have somewhere, but I don't know that they did. So, but yeah, that's a great idea. We are all volunteer pretty much with a very small staff from the ISBA. So I think it'll be helpful to have that additional support from them. But yeah, that's a good suggestion.
It's a big relief, and it's fun. I mean, it was basically like having mission command, because I was in the room with them on one screen with the trials going on another. It was really well done. I think you're gonna be very happy.
Thanks, hopefully. Thanks.
Cynthia, you raised your hand earlier. What were you going to say?
Our competition isn't till next week, but we have a plan in place for the scoring judge that doesn't turn in their score sheet or technical failure, and we have a presiding judge ballot. And so we're asking every presiding judge to do a ballot no matter what, and we'll get it in. And so if there's any technical failures or after 15 minutes we don't have score sheets, we just go with that ballot and move on to stay on schedule.
Yeah, thanks to Cynthia and to Michael from Pennsylvania. Both of you guys helped us out with looking at options for score sheets, and we built one through our state bar website, and then we cloned it for each region so that the score sheet is automatically directed to the right regional or district coordinator. And the work that Michael and Cynthia did laying the groundwork on that was super helpful, and it's worked like a freaking charm for this year. Even when people mess it up, we have a central mailbox that it all gets sent to, so you can just search the judge's last name, pop it out, if they sent it to the wrong coordinator. So it's been a gem this year. All of our judges are demanding that we go for electronic scoring next year. I don't know how we're going to do that in courthouses, but they love not having to do the math. They love just being able to click and pop, and they're addicted now.
Yeah, I've sent. My season is typically 16 separate regions around the state, but with this one, it's all centralized into one big state tournament. So I'm kind of the coordinator for the whole thing, and I've got them all coming in through Cognito forms is what I've been using, and it's easy to set up a few different views and export it to Excel, and then crunch the numbers as needed with that. But it does the math automatically, and it's been pretty seamless with trying to make it happen. And I know they're all going to want it next year. So now I got to work on how we make that happen next year.
Yeah. So we're using a jot form version of it, and we added a section for feedback because usually there's not much time for feedback for judges to provide in the space. So that's one thing we're hopeful of a silver lining is that not only math, which is like the biggest silver lining, but also more feedback, and then we can download their ballots, put them in a shared file, and then share them hopefully pretty efficiently with the coaches so that they can use it as an instructional coaching tool for their next step.
Yeah, we don't have the verbal feedback afterwards with the Zoom thing, but our score sheet, next to every point box, there's a comment box that they can put in whatever comments they want and everything. And I've had like a ton more comments given this year than in any other year past, because it's easier to type it out in real time than to handwrite it on a carbon form. And I'm able, through the form system, to pull the comments out, and I've got a mail merge with Word where the next morning I email the comments from all 3 score sheets to the coaches from the night before's rounds. So they get that feedback pretty quick. And some of these evaluators have written like paragraphs for each part of the trial and everything. So it's a whole lot more feedback than they've ever gotten from an evaluator in person and even written down. So that's, a lot of them have said that they like that aspect where they can give that kind of feedback that much quicker and everything.
Interesting. We're having the opposite experience here. We're getting a lot less feedback.
Do you guys, so Illinois, we've never allowed written feedback ever. We just do verbal at the end, and the process program actually has a feedback option, which we probably won't do this year just because we're trying to make it everything as simple as possible. But if we end up having to do this next year, does anyone ever have any problems with people putting inappropriate things in the written feedback or saying stuff that's not, that's not helpful to the kids? That's always been a little bit of a concern.
I mail merge and send. I'll let the coaches go through it. I send it as a Word document. I'll let the coaches kind of go through, and if they want to filter anything, they can. But I'm running 7, 8, 9 courtrooms a night. So I don't have time to read through 21, 28 different forms and stuff. But yeah, I'll just send it out and let them deal with it. Melissa, you asked about breakout rooms. My score sheet thing is a completely separate website, so it doesn't do anything through the breakout room. But using the breakout rooms as courtrooms in Zoom has been great. I went through the process of having all of the teams fill out a form with all the email addresses that their teams were going to use to log into Zoom with. And I'm requiring all of the participants to have a Zoom account. So the personal free account, whatever it's called. And that's what they've got to go to get on Zoom. And then I preload a list of email addresses and the breakout room names into my Zoom meeting the day of. And so when those email addresses log in, they automatically get pushed into a breakout room. And so I've got one for my jury panel, and they all just wind up in there. And then I at least put the coaches into the team rooms. I put plaintiff teams into the actual courtrooms and defense teams into their own team room. And then anyone else that doesn't make the 200 email list, I'll hand sort when they come in. But that's made a huge difference on getting a lot of people already kind of shuffled in automatically. And then it's pretty easy to move around from there to push them to courtrooms. I know it's a privacy thing that Laura's really, really worried about with me, but no one's complained yet.
No, I have a question. So but they don't go into the breakout rooms, so you hit open breakout rooms and then
Right.
they all go.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you meet with your judges? Because they'll automatically, as soon as your breakout rooms are open, they'll automatically get shuttled in. So you don't have a chance to meet with them ahead of time?
No, I do. No. So when I log in, like I'll get in a few minutes before the meeting officially opens. So the meeting is scheduled to open at 5:15. I'll get in a little for that, and I'll go ahead and open the breakout rooms. And so all my jury gets pushed into the jury room, and then at 6, I'll go in there and do the jury orientation to then push them into the courtrooms at like 6:30.
You'll manually sign them into the courtrooms at that time?
Yeah,
or-
and then and at that point, so I've got the judges listed on their naming protocol with their courtroom number first,
Mhm.
dash if they're eval or judge, and then their name in parentheses. And then all the courtrooms are numbered as a courtroom, and then the 2 teams who are in there. And so when I'm in the judging orientation breakout room, when it's time to shuffle them in, I'll just go through the assign to, and it's easy to assign all the 2601s to that one courtroom, and they just pop in and they go. And the teams are named with the team code first, so it's easy to push them around to the rooms as they need to be.
Great. So they're just separate. So automatically all the kids and teams go when they sign in because you have their emails, but the coaches, but the volunteers are separate. Okay.
Yeah, and the Zoom only allows you to upload 200 emails for pre-assigned breakout rooms, and then that gets all the coaches. So there's a coach in the room automatically, and then as kids log in, they change their name real fast. I'll see their team WA, and then I'll just assign them to their team room to begin with. And then before I go to judging panel, I push all the defense teams into the courtrooms with the plaintiffs teams for the first time. But having all the teams in their own separate rooms for half an hour or so helps, because it gives them a chance to make sure everyone's all logged in correctly. I send reminders to the broadcast thing to change names and to fix names. If a team wants to record their round, the coach comes to me and I give them recording privileges, and so they can record it in the breakout room locally to their computer. And then I've got one of my volunteers that checks in panel members when they come in, and they've got co-host privileges, so they can just change the names as they need to as they come in to keep it all up to speed and everything. So it's worked out pretty well. It took a week to kind of get the system down, but yeah, it works out pretty easy. And having it all in one meeting does help, instead of having different meeting numbers. Everyone's in one big room, so that I can bounce into court. And I'm the only non-evaluating whatever person there each night. So if somebody needs help, they dip out, find me, I can go help them or whatever. And that's been okay. I don't have somebody in every room as a bailiff or a blue shirt or something.
We haven't had, I mean, we've had the same experience with the opposite structure. We've used the individual Zoom rooms, and there hasn't been a problem. If somebody has a problem, they just know to pop back to the tab Zoom room or the judge's orientation Zoom room, which we told them all at the beginning. They come run in, and we just move from one room to another. We didn't want to, we don't have a Michael to sort of figure out like these cool auto assigns and everything else. So we've just gone with, in Philadelphia at least, I don't know what they're doing statewide, but in Philadelphia at least, it's just, we make sure we have 12 or 13, we have 13 Zoom rooms, and we tell the night before, you're going to courtroom 1, you're going to courtroom 2, and then courtroom 13, lucky 13 is always our judge room.
Is it one meeting number, or is it individual meeting licenses?
Individual Zoom meeting licenses. We had some from the State Bar and some from the Pennsylvania Social Studies Organization, because we're mostly using them at like off hours for their meetings. And so we just, we log into the rooms the night before, we find out what the Zoom linkages are, we email those to the two competing in that room, and we also include with that, here's where you go if there's a problem. So I think that what we've learned, from what I can tell from, partially from the chat and partially from the conversation, is that people who are doing breakout rooms, it's working well. And people who are not doing breakout rooms, it's working well. Like both the systems seem to be working pretty well in terms of getting people where they're going. And there's no, at least we're not seeing huge differences in people's ability to manage it.
So for the individual licenses, your judging panel has the one link to the judging panel room, and then when it's time for them to go to the courtroom, they leave that meeting. They put in.
So we email all of our judges the morning of and say, here are the Zoom links for courtrooms 1 through 12.
Okay.
Here's the Zoom. Come to 13 first. We'll dismiss you from there. And then we just tell them, you're going to courtroom 1. You're going to courtroom 2. They've already got the email that says that, and they just follow the link.
Okay.
It just saves us from having to do all of that data inputting and directing and stuff. It means you do a little bit of reinventing the wheel every week, but it's not that big a deal if you're going to run, a limited number of trials.
Yeah, we're fairly similar. And I put what we did in the chat, or what we're doing, at least for our orientations, in the chat, sharing a example full day schedule with the hyperlinks for any time somebody needs to be in the full room, and then a separate trial schedule, which would have the individual courtroom links that are there too. And we've been doing a lot of orientations where we're explaining that to facilitators and then to the judges, and then sharing separately the facilitator. Well, I guess you'll all see all the Zoom links. I just realized that too, that we just put in there. Have at it, I guess. But that's what we're sharing with all our judges. So facilitators will log in first using the credentials that are in the document I just shared. And then people will use the hyperlinks that are embedded in the document with a full list of the links behind it in case there's any they need to call in.
We found what's worked for sharing the trial rosters, because teams want to get them before the trial starts, and some of the panel members want to get them, is that I've made a Google Drive folder and had the teams upload the rosters to it. And then I've got another folder for each day of competition where I put just those that are in that day's competition. And then I give a link to the panel members where they go and find those the day of the trial. And some of them want to print them out beforehand and everything. So trying to, that's worked out well. I haven't tried to have the teams always share it through the chat. But again, people like having them before trial starts when possible.
I just put in the chat, but we did the same thing where we uploaded all of the rosters into a Google Drive folder. But at the very beginning, it was a problem with attorneys. I think when they sign up and when they want to judge, so many of them are doing it from their offices, and their firms just don't let them. They're not Google friendly. They can't do Google Drive and all of that. And so we definitely had an issue where they would have to ping me. And so I was individually emailing certain judges and attaching those rosters. And so it worked well for the kids. It seems like schools are very Google friendly. They're just very dependent on it. And so it was easy for them to access that big folder with all of the rosters. But I was just curious if maybe somebody had gotten around that in some other way for attorneys to be able to access them.
I hadn't heard of any blocks. Any of my blocks would come from schools, but none of them have said anything about it either. So
I put it in the chat, and we handled the same thing the same way that John did. If you had a problem getting to it, we just emailed it to you or told you to look on your personal cell phone. And frankly, this year we basically suspended the roster rules. We're like, look, you can get to the courtroom. We know that you're going to be in the courtroom for at least 15 or 20 minutes before the rest of us are, because our judges are gathering at the same time as the students. You can figure it out. They figured it out. I think the Google Drive is a better way to go. But we just sort of told them, look, brute force it. You'll get there. You can talk to each other. You can see what it is. And, you know, to the extent that the judges need to know.
I got a Zoom question.
Yeah.
So speaking of blocking, a number of our schools used district issued Chromebooks for their students. And they indicated that the districts wouldn't allow them to install Zoom on their Chromebooks. So far, we've been okay, and it seems that they can access it out of the browser. But I just wonder if anybody has had similar issues, or if there's anything we should be looking out for.
We've had that with a couple schools, and we were in contact with their tech department directly, and then they authorized use because they saw the protections that we were going through to make sure that the students had, you know, as much privacy or whatever as possible. Like it wasn't a free for all. So we shared all of the tentative Zoom links in advance, and they authorized whatever thing that hadn't otherwise been authorized to go there. And that was 2 districts in our state where we've just done a little extra work with their IT department. Chromebooks as a whole are a problem for other reasons, mostly equity and the consistency of experience of different users. And I haven't figured that workaround yet. And like outside of buying everybody their own, you know, laptop, which we can't do. But yeah, so we ended up working and establishing some trust with the individual school districts to say, we promise it's legit. And then those tech departments did a workaround. In a different experience years ago, we had an educational foundation. This is when I was in a school, not as part of the organization, purchase laptops because of Chromebooks and installation issues, because they needed software that they couldn't get through the school Chromebooks. And so that was one workaround as an individual teacher, but not as a statewide organization.
we told our teams, you know, it's going to be on Zoom. You've got to have a laptop or desktop to do it with. We don't want you to try to compete on a phone. Back in like, you know, November, December. And so a lot of the teachers at that point, I said, go talk to your IT people now to get the Zoom client on whatever devices you're going to use. And they went ahead and addressed that. And they beat whoever they needed to beat up to make it happen, and got special permissions and whatnot. So they've been able to make it happen. But I often said, if I need to get involved, let me know. And no one ever took me up on it. So they're able to get it figured out with their IT departments. So I think enough forewarning and what Ellen said of, you know, showing that it's, you know, it's passcode protected and all that kind of stuff, I think helps with that trust of like, okay, it's legit.
We used cell phones as our bailout.
It seemed like it worked out.
We used cell phones as our bailout, and just said, look, if you don't have another device that you can use, using a cell phone's fine. And so I don't think that we had any teams that reported to us that they couldn't do it, because, you know, most of our students, even the ones who are not in an advantaged situation, typically there is a cell phone device or a tablet device in the house for whoever's use normally. that they control for purposes of putting a Zoom app on it. And we've had, I think, a few students compete that way. But, I think a lot of it comes down to exactly what we expected when we started talking about this stuff in July, which is like all of education is online right now. And so all educators and the students are doing their best to find workarounds in most cases, because it's the only way that you're having school. The one goofy thing on the school thing, it's a tiny thing, but it's a good thing to remind teams. So like if you guys don't have show only the video participants on right now, you'll see that we've got a whole bunch of people who just have their name up. We had a couple of students who have that, but apparently you can set that with like an image or seal. And they set it with like their school seal. So when they would turn off their camera, it would identify their team. Again, not a huge issue. We just sort of reminded them, but it's like all of the little, in the long line of like all the little things that you didn't think of. It's like what your black screen, school seal, school pride thing is doing to your anonymity. All right. I know that there are probably quite a few people who want to do, who want to watch Perseverance land. And I know that that's coming sometime in the next 10 minutes or so, or at least the 7 minutes of terror are beginning in the next 7 minutes or so. So I don't want to keep everybody too long, but we did have a lot of questions about sort of strategies for spectators, and how to do all of these other things with that. And so if there's anybody who had anything, we've already gone around a fair amount about that and people have put stuff into the chat and everything else, but is there anybody who has had additional experiences or different experiences about the way to handle spectators that they want to share? Okay, is there anybody who wants to cover it? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm Haley from Alabama.
Yeah.
We embed like a custom live streaming service into our Zooms called Dougcast. And we allow spectators, it's like $5 a trial to watch there. The only way you can get around that is if you're like a board member, we can give you a promo code to watch, or if you're in the physical room with the students, but we make the kids like do a 360 with their webcam to make sure that we can see all spectators that are physically there with them.
Cool.
It's been very effective, so I recommend that system.
This is Amber from Washington. With the individual Zoom link counts, we're able to live stream through YouTube, and we just post it unlisted. So it's not even private. Only the folks with the link can get to it, which eliminates all the extra people on the Zoom call. And then we realize that it does record it, so we're able to share the links out later. We use Process for our tournament management, just us 2 staff. We don't hire any staff through them, but it's pretty streamlined to do just the 2 of us plus a volunteer an hour before the trial starts. But again, I don't know that works in breakout rooms. But then we can see how many people are viewing. Is it worth it if we had to do this next year? It's just been really slick part of, and it just links up from Zoom into your Gmail to YouTube. And then we can share it with our CEO at the Y or different folks that donors, our board members, if they're not able to watch the live stream. So that's been really handy.
That's awesome.
Curious, is there any issues with like scouting by having these recordings out there?
So so folks, I mean, if you shared yours with another team, then you would be scouting each other, but they're not posted anywhere. We literally share them just with, like, there's an observer link that we use through Process, but if I share it out to my board, or there's like a middle school team that wants to watch next week, I'm going to share that with them. So there could be, like, oh, hey, Camus, Washington, like, can you share this with, you saw that, can we see it? But they'd have to really go out of their way for scouting, because it's unlisted. You can't even search it on YouTube.
Got it.
It's very private.
So how did you link the YouTube with the live streaming to Zoom?
Yeah, so when you're in a Zoom, so you probably have it, but there's usually a menu button down at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
and you'll click on that. So in your account settings before you go, you have to allow YouTube or Facebook Live.
Okay.
And then on your menu setting down at the bottom of your toolbar, you'll click live stream to YouTube. And then that will take you, you just have to link your Gmail account. You have to activate live stream and it takes 24 hours. So if in your Gmail/YouTube account, you activate that, and then it'll take you, and all three of us have done it on, so we've had 6 trials going at once and we've been able to live stream on that same Gmail. And then my staff and volunteer will send me their links, and then I can see all the trials at once. If I'm in one courtroom, then I can see all the trials at once. And if there's an issue, or we've had, just to mention, we've had a lot of coaches accusing teens of playing on both sides or on another team. A little bit's been some racial bias, unfortunately. You know, they're just identifying folks by looking on the Zoom screen, and then we go back and we look at witness 3 and we're like, nope, that's not the same person. It's pretty obvious. But as we all know, mock trial can be a blood sport. So that's what's also been helpful, is that we've been able to go back and find and prove anything right or wrong. Yeah,
Amber?
and then you just copy that YouTube link, you copy that, you click unlisted, you copy that, and then send it out to the hyperlink to whoever you want to have access.
Amber, does it work though on the individual breakout rooms? You're live streaming those all at the same time? The
Yeah,
individual
I
breakout
don't
rooms?
know.
I think it's just the main room.
Yeah, we don't do breakout rooms, and so that's where I'm not sure that that works.
Okay.
You'd have to look.
Yeah, we did the Zoom, we did our award ceremony, we live streamed it. That worked pretty well to our homepage, our website homepage.
Nice.
That worked well.
Might be that might be a reason for us, those of us who are advising the national board, and I see that we still have Tim here from Indiana. It might be a reason for us to consider doing the separate rooms if it permits us to do live streaming, because you know these folks' families can watch more easily if it's being live streamed. Just take the risk on the scouting and live with it.
And I found the YouTube live stream being unlisted was safer than Facebook Live, where like we have code of conducts and everyone's, you know, said okay to having their kids on screen or recorded, but we through our own organization, through the Y, we've had to be more cautious with child abuse prevention. So Facebook Live, anyone could see it and, you know, take screenshots, do whatever. So the unlisted kind of alleviates some of that worry.
Amber, we might reach out to you to talk a little bit more about that in advance of national.
Yeah, it's super easy. It just takes people power and a little extra time. We just go on an hour before the trial and we set it up and get it all going.
Okay. Well, I think that we're coming toward the end of a very productive session. Thanks everybody for coming. And it was really good to see everybody. And I feel like we got a lot of tips and tricks traded here. So hopefully that's, hopefully we're living up to the purpose of having this. And Michael, I'm going to ask you to archive the chat because the chat was pretty handy.
Yeah.
This time, and we'll get this up for everybody who couldn't join us. And we're sad that you weren't here, but we miss you, and we'll see you guys in March as well for another thing. And I'm going to assign a little homework for all of our state coordinator members for March. Take a look at the national rules of competition as we publish them in October. I know most of you guys already have from when we put them up in August and everything. If you think that there are rules that need to be changed, those need to be changed by April 1st. We can do that in that 2 weeks, but everybody should come with their thoughts if there are particular rules that they think we should be looking at and throwing through our rules committee, because we'll have the time to meet before then and get it done. But we want to make sure that when teams register and start seeing, you know, and they're joining us on April 1st, they know what rules they'll be competing under, absent something crazy. So we could take the lessons learned and make them concrete for nationals. And with that,
Will do.
Be at peace. Everybody enjoy. And I hope you all get to see something land on Mars in the next couple minutes.